Welcome to Beyond the Prep, a podcast dedicated to providing information and insights into the bodybuilding sport. This podcast covers a wide range of topics from finding a coach to the struggling of competing, nutrition, supplements, cost, and much more. I'll be talking with competitors so you can hear their stories, judges, coaches. If you're interested in sharing your story, send me a note at scapach40@gmail.com. Welcome to Beyond the Prep. I'm your host for today, Sherrie Capach, and I have Christina Specos as my guest. She is 24-year strength and condition training coach and an IFBB pro. Welcome, Christina, and thank you for joining me today.
Oh my gosh, this is going to be a fun conversation. Thank you for having me. I love podcasts, and especially since we're diving into bodybuilding, it's going to be really valuable for people to learn.
I agree. Lots out there that needs to be said and heard for this bodybuilding. So why did you get into this sport to begin with?
It was very organic. Let's put it that way. I think it was the perfect storm of being very unhappy with my current state at that time and a goal that I had always had. And as I talk to people who haven't competed yet or people that are looking into getting into competing, they say the same thing. This is something they've always wanted to do, but they don't know where to start, right? So I was a college strength coach. I was 36 years old at the time. And it literally was a funny experience. A girl just walked in as a new employee in the department. And I'm like, who the heck is that? And she wasn't a competitor yet, but she was like all into fitness or whatever. And then we became friends. And she said, I have a coach and I'm going to do a bodybuilding show. And I said, hey, tell me how? Because she was like 23, right? So there was a huge age gap, but I was like, I like her energy. What if, and I'm always thinking like a team, right? I'm like, oh my gosh, what if we did this together? Then we're accountable to each other. And that's kind of how it happened. So I met her coach at the time. They had gone to church together, and her coach and I are still very close friends to this day. So my first coach in 2016 taught me the ropes. And I think what got me to hire her was because just before she walks into my office, because my office was the gym, I had some pretty ugly blood work, and being a honor society student, you don't like a bad report card. And I did not like the cholesterol or any of that stuff. And I had, ironically, being in fitness since 1999, had ups and downs with my own fitness, even being in the profession. I just was like, no, that's the straw that broke the camel's back. We're done. We're doing this. And she just walked in at the right time and was the catalyst that helped me start that journey. Because I knew nothing, nowhere to go, no one to look up, nothing.
Mm-hmm. So during your first prep, what kind of struggles went along with that? Did you have some struggles?
I'm sure I did, because I remember, how they say, you always remember how people make you feel. Well, I always remember how my first coach made me feel. And oftentimes I remember us talking at the wee hours of the morning. She was pregnant and up all hours, and I was up crying about something stupid. So I know that there were some struggles, but if I'm looking at it like a scale, I feel like the good times and the fun part of the journey experience was better than the struggles. Okay. So I think the common struggle for everyone is usually the food, because the first time you do it, I was caught between this place where I was super excited for a new diet and super excited to just track it. And then it's even more exciting when you see the benefits week by week and you just follow it to a T because you're excited. But then when diet fatigue kicks in, or somebody around you has something that you want and you just can't do that, that's usually the biggest struggle for most people. And I know hands down that was one for me. Mm-hmm. I also think perfectionism was a struggle for me, because being my first show, on one hand, I was very excited. I was finally doing something that I wanted to do, and I felt really empowered. But then there's a reality that hits you if I'm a perfectionist and I have comparison syndrome, how am I going to deal with that? That was hard. And so that's where I feel like my coach, let me say this, I could have never done this without a coach, first of all. And second of all, I think where the coaches really come in is, the expertise of exactly bodybuilding and training is a hands down, like non-negotiable. That's like their job. But the intangibles of a coach being like, yo, listen, this is your race. Look at you. Don't look at anyone else. We're comparing where you came from. I think that's the reminder that new competitors need. Even now, to this day, like a little more seasoned, I need to hear that from my closest friends who really do it at a high level, because they understand that now it's a different thing. In the beginning, it's like half fun and novice and heart nerves. And now, like, as I've gotten older, it's like more nerves and less, I don't want to say less fun, but I think about it a lot differently. So just starting out, the struggle was mental, but in a different way, mental and food.
And there's so much more for, as you were saying, the comparison with the social media aspect of it. It just makes it so much harder for competitors to not compare.
Yeah, and you know what? Once the algorithm like figures out your tendencies, now my explore page is all of these like massive people that are ripped, and I'm like, no. And I'll just like look at it and send it to my friends, and I'll be like, how? Because I'm still in awe of what the body can do. Whether it's photoshopped or not, I don't know, but I will send it to my closest friends, and they'll be like, stop looking at it. I'm like, it's finding me. It's really hard to turn it off. I know some people that get off social media altogether when they're in prep. I use it for my business, so I have to learn how to limit my time on it and use it appropriately. But man, don't go to that explore page. There's someone who's always looking good.
Oh, true. So you've received your pro card. You're now pro. Congratulations. That's awesome.
Thanks.
So how long, was that one of your goals when you got into this? Or
my goal the first year was to not be embarrassed. Like, I didn't start bodybuilding saying I want to be a pro. And I see people who do that now who don't have an understanding of what it takes. So it's almost like undue pressure. I started it because I just wanted to achieve a goal. And then, interestingly enough, the girl and I who got started together, she kind of fell by the wayside with it, never did it again. And I just fell in love with it. And now here I am, 8 years later, and really, really happy that the years that I took off were 2020, because the world kind of shut down. So give credit to those people who still competed that year. I didn't have the determination to fight through a global pandemic. So for people who did, hey, more power to you. And then I took last year off to just train and like eat, because sometimes you miss that. But I never started by saying I'm going to be a pro or I'm going to go to the Olympia. Even these days, like, just this is only going to be my second pro show this year. And I said to somebody the other day, I was like, I don't sit here and say I want to go to the Olympia. Like, I kind of want to see where the chips fall, because I'm that person. I kind of have to keep things in striking distance, right? Like I don't want to dream so far ahead that I forget to do what's right in front of me and do that well, because then this is not even a shot. So it kind of like evolved. In 2016, I started. I was really happy that I accomplished this. I felt really alive. I felt really empowered. Felt obviously very fit. 17 rolls around. That was the worst year I ever had in terms of just mentally, the ramifications post-show and the state that I was in and the experience that I had. And then 18 and 19 revived me, and I turned pro in 19. And it became one of those things that every year the theme of the year, I guess, like the first year was novice and virginal and exciting. And the second year was, oh my God, I have a shot to do this. He believes in me. And I put all this pressure on myself. And then 18 was like me really rebuilding my self-esteem, because I got so smacked the year before. And then 19 was the year that I went on stage. And I remember I was friendly with one of the expediters, and I looked over at him. I was like, Rich, I know I got it this year. And it happened. And it was like something where you just know, like, you left no stone unturned. And it was a feeling of calm and peace. Whereas the first national show, pro qualifier I went to, I was like shaking like a leaf. Everything was wrong. My suit broke. I looked horrible. I was cramping. Like everything went wrong. And then the year that I turned pro, everything felt right. So hopefully if someone's listening and they're like, how do you manage those emotions?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes the cards fall in your favor. And sometimes you just know that, like, you just have this sixth sense, like, I did everything right. I'm okay no matter what happens, but I really have a good feeling. And that's kind of how I went into it.
Nice. That's great. Yeah, you kind of just, you have that gut feeling. Like, this is it. This is it.
Yeah. And every year I learned something about my body, how it responded to certain food. Different coaches have different things that they like to test on you in prep with how you respond to certain foods, which is the greatest experience that I had after a poor experience. I had some really good experiences where we tried different things at different, and I was very consistent throughout, like, say 2 years, 3 years straight, where I never really came off diet. Maybe I took like 2 weeks off of training just to really, because if you're going to train that hard for so many years, you need to take some time off and have a deload period. And I needed that mentally and physically. And that's also something that I feel like a lot of competitors don't give themselves the credit for. Like, take the time off. Like, don't feel guilty. You're not going to lose anything. You're actually going to take a step back to catapult forward. And those are the years where I could say that the coaching that I had and the approaches that I had were very, like, emotionally intelligent, calm people leading that I could trust and relax. Because the worst thing you could do is, like, hire somebody to worry about how they're going to do their job. Just let them do their job and then you do your part. And then that's hopefully how it shakes out to keep you calm through the process.
So have you had to change out your coaches for any?
So I did, and only one was because after about a year-ish, I didn't align with that particular person, but I had the same coach for 18 and 19, and then COVID happened. And COVID was one of those things where I got to March. We shut down, I think, like March 15th or 17th or something in Florida. And I was like, okay, I'm going to give this about a month. And then about 6 weeks later, because luckily I live in a warm place, I could go out run. All of a sudden, like, oh my God, I went from never running to running 6 days a week to doing band workouts to doing step ups on like things at the beach, and it was great. I was able to maintain what I had. And my coach was like, yeah, you'll be fine. I'm like, you know what? I came off of really, really, really heavy weights in the gym. And at the 6 week mark, I'm like, I just got that panic and that paranoia that I don't want to push something where I don't know where it's going to go. Like, shows kept changing dates and venues and locations. And that's the worst. When you have a date and a location, you prepare for it, and now you have to roll with the punches. And I get it that, like, that's resiliency, but the anxiety is high in prep. You need something as a stable variable. So about 6 weeks after the whole COVID shutdown, I was like, I can't do this. Like, I can't. There's no way I'm going to be competitive. I am more sore doing boatloads of volume of band work in my apartment, worried that I'm going to, like, get fat and compete in 6 months or whatever it is. I'm like, I need to probably hang it up this year. And so the only reason why I separated from that coach is because I thought I was never going to compete again. COVID came in and I was like, I feel like I'd still be with him to this day if COVID didn't happen. But then in 21, one of my really close friends who's an Olympian coached me, and he kind of got me out of that rut. Well, not kind of, definitely got me out of that rut. And I stepped in on stage in 21 for my first pro show. And that was like, not because the previous coach was bad, but because, like, I you can't mentally go into just doing it because you think you should. And I didn't want to go to a super high level coach that I had before and say, I don't really know if I want to do this, but can you coach me anyway? So it was easier, even though my friend is a super high level coach and has hundreds of athletes, or probably like 100 athletes, but the water was warmer, to just be like, well, kind of got fat in 2020. Everybody was depressed. COVID, the world's exploding. I'm eating brownies every day with peanut butter. I'm like, I don't know. Can I do this? And it was a lot more inviting than trying to just go back to where I was, because I had fallen down from the high note that we left,
Yeah. Yeah.
So there was a little bit of probably embarrassment, but also uncertainty on my part. Can I do this again?
Yeah.
And it happened.
Ready to do that again?
Yeah. So I listen to when people talk about their coaching changes over the years, because some people coach hop because they just can't connect with people. And I think that's a huge factor. You have to be able to connect with your coach. I've been really blessed that the different coaches that I've had, I've connected with, except one was a little bit more impersonal experience. But I did learn a lot about the different approaches. So I feel like sometimes people think about changing coaches as a negative. I believe that if you can have continuity with someone you really do well with, stick with them and grow with them.
Mm-hmm.
But if you have like that kind of sort of stopgap that I had, and you're like, well, what am I going to do? And then you go a different route, you actually learn different approaches. And that was one of my best peaks into show, because he fed me so much food. And I was like, yo, this is a nice change. This is different, because, you know, the whole prep was different, and the whole year was different, and the whole philosophy was a little different, even though most really good coaches are very similar in the principles. But I was like, this is cool. I'm learning a lot. So that's the benefit of changing coaches when necessary.
Yeah. Yeah. Because you see a lot of questions of, is it safe to change coaches? You know, I'm 1 month out or I'm 2 months out and I'm not getting responses, and, you know, just things aren't going well. Should I switch? And it's like, absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, I agree with you. And that's sort of like an unwritten rule with coaches who have like 100, 125, 150 athletes. There is this rule that I feel like people need to understand. Like, if you are 12 weeks out and under, you're going to get priority in the messaging. But if you are 9, 10 months out of a show, nothing is an emergency at this point, unless you're like literally dying and going to the emergency room or something. So a lot of people get upset with their coaches prematurely because they don't understand that 12 weeks out and under, if someone has a significant amount of people on their coaching roster, they're at shows with them. They're traveling every weekend. They're watching the minute-to-minute changes that your butt that's 11 months out. Like, you can't just judge a coach based on the fact that the response time's a little different for someone who's very, very off season and someone who's like competing tomorrow. And I think if a coach is not responsive, just period, because they're just taking your money and they're just not good, then yeah, oh my gosh, I would get rid of them ASAP. The trick is like what you said, a month or 2 months out. That's kind of hard. You could save it. You could totally save a prep, depending on how the cards played out, but it's stressful.
Yeah.
It's stressful.
Yeah, for sure. That's a good point, though, to remember that if you're farther out, he's busy, like really busy, especially on a weekend. So bear with him.
Oh yeah, he'd have to put it on his Instagram stories like, hey guys, like, I am traveling this weekend. For those of you over 12 weeks out, like, this is the pecking order of immediately right now what's going on in my life, because he's solely a prep coach.
Mm-hmm.
People who dedicate their life to prep coaching, they have to show up for their pros and people at different shows. And I don't think new competitors understand that you're not getting neglected. You have a year to go. It's okay if you had turkey instead of chicken. Like, don't ask them questions. Like, they just don't know yet. But they're nervous. There's a lot of common sense things that they don't know because they're new.
Yeah, I still do. Like, it's like, when I first started out, FYI, I ate this. No need to respond. Just letting you know, right?
Yeah, exactly. I find myself doing that too. But like, yo, I just took this great picture. I'm like, I know it's not check-in day, but I took this great picture. I'm like, you need to see this, but don't respond because I know you have so-and-so competing. So that was a cool thing, because it's hard. Like, when you are a coach too, and you know, like, how you want to like set the ground rules for your clients, and then you're that client to somebody else. They're like, oh God, you just broke your own rule. Like,
yeah, that's funny. So how did it going pro change your lifestyle or your your programs for working out and things? How did everything change once you went into that higher level?
so if I think back to like that weekend, right? all of a sudden I'm like sitting there, I'm like, I can't wait, because this was like November. I was like, I can't wait to get the new year schedule. Can't wait to get the 2020 schedule, because this was like way pre-COVID, right? This is like November of 19. And so you're amped up, you're like, yeah, I want to attack it, but you're really in a vulnerable state where you're super skinny, you're depleted, you're like, you're at show weight, like to jump to the next level and be competitive. I'm gonna say that it's gonna take a proper reverse and appropriate food. My approach to training, I don't want to say it's changed completely, but I have, especially this year, I have really benefited from truly going to exhaustion and dropping the volume. But in the beginning, tons of volume worked for me. So in 2017, when my shoulders first started popping really for the first time, I was like, I looked at my shoulder workouts. I was like, wow, my volume is really high. And then I got older and I got older and I got older. And now my coach's approach, because I get to see him in person, especially for leg days. And I counted the other day. I'm like, wait a minute, we have an hour workout. We were done 10 minutes early. We started 5 minutes late. And I got in XYZ, and I'm looking at, okay, so let's just say this day I got done squats and leg press and leg extension and glute. Like, say I got like 4, maybe 5 exercises, but they were done like to the max with the like meticulous on the tempo and the intention behind how we're training. I'm like, the old me, and I say this to him all the time, like the old me is like, I need to be doing more. Like, why am I only doing 30 minutes of cardio? Mind you, it's a dream to do 30 minutes of cardio instead of 90. So like, why question it if it's working? But I've seen that as I want to be competitive as an older 42-year-old athlete on a pro stage, I have to be smarter. Whereas in the beginning, I just had to level up and get with the program. I had to train differently. I had to learn how to train. I had to increase my volume to kind of super compensate. And I had to learn the food and get my muscles to be able to, you know, learn how to work, as weird as that sounds. But now we shifted the way it works, and I'm seeing a lot more detail a lot earlier in a prep phase. And I'm like, oh, is that my quads? Like, usually that doesn't happen till like week 5 out. And so it's a very cool experience, because I don't want a blanket statement and say, well, you have to train differently as a pro, because it's kind of a given, but you have to really do what your body needs for balance, symmetry. And for me, especially, we're going hard on legs. My legs always would just wither away and my upper body would stay well during, you know, posing and stuff. I'm like, okay, that's going to be my focus. I know what I got to do. And the training now, and this is even from some of my friends on like the Olympia level too, like they're training in the off season because they're pulling cardio down. Their training is structured in a manner where it feels like cardio. So you're keeping that metabolic response through the weight training and the structure of the weight training and the rest times and the tempos. And it makes up for the fact that you're not slaving away on the Stairmaster because it's too far out of a show to really get that deep into cardio. So there's a lot that I've learned from the approaches I've had to change, the coaches that I've worked with that are different, the approaches that are different, and my friends who are competing at a really high level who do things differently. It's been really cool to get beyond the basic and get to explore those advanced options and learn how other people are doing it.
For sure. Yeah. So what you know now that you wish you would have known when you first started, what would that be?
I think in terms of advice like that, I'm trying to think of what will be the most impactful thing, because I'm thinking in my head like buckets. There's things that I should have known about nutrition, training, mindset, all of these things. I waited until I was 36 to try this, but I was in fitness since 1999, group fitness, step aerobics, the whole thing from the 90s on, right? And I remember being in my early 20s and wanting to do this. I would go during college to nutrition stores and ask them about nutrition and macros and protein bars and shakes and stuff. And then I got so far with like eating tuna and like just researching online when I was in college. And I'm like, all right, I think I'm seeing a little bit of abs, but I don't know. Because it was like self-exploration, right? But then my mindset went to, oh, well, that girl on the cover of Muscle and Fitness or whoever, she's just genetically gifted. That's Photoshop, whatever. Like, I'll never be that. So if I would have said to myself in my early 20s something more positive, I could have started earlier. However, I don't regret starting in my 30s because I built an amazing career. I had a financial foundation where I could compete, and I had a routine of a daily schedule that allowed me to add the time stressor of what I needed to be able to compete. So it's a double-edged sword, because part of me feels like, wow, if I would have said the positive stuff to myself in my early 20s, I wouldn't have self-doubted. But that self-doubt made me come back with a vengeance in my 30s. So it all played out the way it was supposed to. But I think that the best advice is more on the side of mindset. Like, don't sell yourself short, but do it the right way. I was in fitness, so I tried doing the self-exploration. I read a lot. I tried a lot. And I saw it. But if you are like, I want to do this, you have to get a coach right away. You have to seek the best of the best, and you have to just go for it. Because I took the long route because I was busy studying and working and this and that. It wasn't a priority.
Yeah.
But I set myself behind the 8 ball by acting like everybody else with muscle was only genetically gifted, and that me and my little self was just going to be fat forever. Even though I was in fitness because of the nutrition. I could teach all these classes, but I still had pudge. I didn't look the part. I didn't have the shoulders. Like, and even my fitness icons that I would look up to in the group fitness world, I'm like, they look better than me. And it's just the evolution that I went through. You know, if you fix your nutrition, most of the time you can pull down some of the effort in your training and take the long route. And I think I didn't understand that either. That nutrition, no matter what you're doing, whether you're in group fitness or you're just lifting, it's going to be what makes or breaks the look and the recovery and the muscle growth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. True enough. So on that note now, let's turn the page to posing. So a lot of them also don't realize what's involved in the posing, and the sweating up there and the cramping and the pain because you can't tell from the audience.
Right. Oh yeah, but some of us are like shaking like a leaf, sweating down like that crack in your back that goes and you're like, oh my God, I can't itch that. And like, you're just like, the thing with posing is that it's like exercise. And when I hired posing coaches to just drill me, 30 minutes is exhausting. You're drenched, right? So if you do it right and you learn how to pose right, you need to then, once you learn how to do those lat flares or how to do this positioning, now it's drilling it so you have the stamina to do it when you're in a depleted state. I mean, you're going to be carb loaded most likely, but you know, water is pulled a little bit and it's different. So I say this from the perspective of someone who hates to pose. I don't like to pose until I'm lean because it's an ego thing, right? Nobody wants to, like, you can't flex fat, so it's not fun. But for the muscle resiliency, you know, even if you can't see it, like, you should do that there to train the muscle, you know? But when it comes to like that peak week, and I know a lot of guys might be different because maybe, you know, guys are bigger and it's a little more extreme depending on who you are. Maybe someone's experience is different. But I almost feel like if you are lean enough getting on stage and you're doing it the right way and you're posing consistently, you could circumvent some of the problems that some people run into when they try to, at the last minute, pull a miracle. And then all of a sudden, like, it's too hard on the body. And now everything you do, which is what happened in 2017, I was so depleted. I could not pose without cramping. Could not. And I'm like, how am I going to do this? And then the suit is breaking, and then my glutes are flat, and then all these disasters are happening. I'm like, I'm done. Like, let's just get this over with. I want to go home, get pizza. Like, it makes you feel better when you do make the commitment to do it throughout the off season. and work on that presence, because that's another thing. People just think you just get up there and you flex, and then you turn and you flex, and you turn. No, like the best of the best, they give it like almost like an exotic sensual show, right? Like the way they move their body is artistic, and then you see the flexing, and then you see the display of the work. And if you can't display it, it's like having the most beautiful hologram wrapped Lamborghini, and you put it in the garage and then you don't drive it.
Yeah.
Like you want to put your package out on the street, and if you can't pose and show it, it hurts you. Even if you do feel like this is the best shape you've ever been in your life, it doesn't matter. You can't show the judges that for the 40 seconds. It's all they have to judge you on. It's cruel. It's mean.
Yeah, you work that hard to get there. You want to be able to present it the best.
Exactly.
For sure. Yeah. So what is one piece of advice that you could give someone who is just considering to compete? What would the one piece of advice that you would give them?
Oh my gosh, I have like 20,000 pieces. I'm going to like sort of give two, because this one is going to sound so like, yeah, we've heard this a million times before, but why? Like, what's your why? That is like hands down the first one, because that's going to set the foundation for, okay, when it gets hard and you're depleted and someone walks in with cake, what are you going to do? How are you going to turn a blind eye? Why are you? So I had a moment where I hated everything. I hated cardio. I hated the diet. And I remember my mother had become paralyzed in 2015. And this was that 2017 prep that was really hard. And I remember it was 4:30 in the morning. It was the only time I could do my cardio, because I was a strength coach at a college. So I had keys to the place. And the kids were coming in for a 6 a.m. workout. And I'm like, miserable, towel over my head. And my why was revealed to me at the darkest time, where I was like, I hate this. I hate everybody. I don't like any of this. I want to go home. I want to quit and eat donuts. And I remembered, you need to sack up. Your why is that your mother had a surgery that's routine for people with back issues and came out paralyzed. What would you feel like if you couldn't walk again? But because you have the ability to walk, you better walk up that darn Stairmaster and keep it going until that hour is up. And that's really what put it in perspective for me. Like, I have the ability to maximize my potential and use my body, and some people don't. And whether I did it because I wanted the challenge, or afterwards I realized, wow, this is actually inspiring people, whatever the motivation is, my motivation was like, I didn't want to be a whiner when I know that ability was stripped from someone I care about. So knowing your why and why you do it and what's going to keep you going through the suck is number one. And I think the second thing is something I'm stressing to people now is know your expenses. Like, there is a lot that goes into this, that we were talking about this earlier, like, this whole sport's become very mainstream because there's so many local shows that not only are we seeing, in comparison to pro and national level, bodies that are a little bit lackluster, right? You know, because they're starting, but it's become mainstream to the average person who otherwise like sits behind a desk and eats McDonald's, right? That looks great. But then when you get into that world, you realize, oh my gosh, by the time I step on stage, I'm like, I'm not that good. And so you realize there's a process and there's a financial commitment to be your best. From, okay, if we listed them all out, right? And if you're watching, write it down. So you've got your coaching, number one. Of course, you have all the food that they're going to have you buy, which theoretically should be cheaper because you're not going to be eating out. You're not going to be drinking. You're not going to be eating desserts. So chicken is a heck of a lot cheaper. Maybe not eggs anymore, but so your food, supplements, whatever. Obviously, gym fees are a given. Posing coaches, suits, jewelry if you're a female, the shoes, depending on your division, on the day, hair, makeup, unless you do your own, which I've done my own, and I've had it done. And when I did my own, it was always better. So I eliminated that expense. But the tanning, the touch up for the tanning, you're probably going to want to buy the photos, you know, the travel to the show, whether you drive or fly. And no matter what, unless it's right around the corner, you're probably going to need a hotel. Are you going to be paying for friends to see you there, or do you expect them to pay for it to support you? Like, there's so many things that go into it that it really hit me. Like when I went to sell old suits, people were like, I didn't want to pay that much. I'm like, it's $200. I'm like, this was an $800 suit. Like, what do you think this is? Like, this isn't just like, oh, I like diet like Jenny Craig and then I go to the beach. Like, it's not like that. And a lot of people don't know the expenses. So I think that's something that people really need to research seriously. Like, sit down with your bank account and make sure that you can budget it. Cause that's what I did. And I realized, like, okay, this is coming up. And you have to have your suit order in by this time, and you have to have your posing coach paid by this time, and you have to do this, this, and this. Are you prepared for this? That's the reality check of like actually doing it. Whereas the why is like the getting started reality check of like, how are you going to do it when it gets tough? And then sometimes getting tough is financial.
Yeah.
And I think that comes down to personal standard. Like, I want to be the best, and I'll pull myself from a show if I don't feel like I'm competitive. And some people are like, well, I'm okay. I don't really need a suit. I'm just going to get a basic one. Or I don't really need a posing coach. I'm just going to watch YouTube videos. And they're all great resources, but I never wanted to show up clueless. Because that, me personally, that would hurt my ego, and that would hurt my mental state afterwards when everyone looks good and I didn't put the work in or the effort to be on that level.
Yeah.
That's the third thing to be wary of, the mental ramifications if you're not doing it for the right reasons, which kind of goes back to the why.
Yeah. Yeah. I even found with my first show, I went to a show to watch so that I at least had some sort of knowledge of what goes on there, because I had nothing. So that was a big help.
I was doing that too. And I remember somebody said something really piercing to me that I'll never forget. And I don't even remember who she was, but I think she was a pro at the time. And it was like 6 years ago when I first started. And I had placed like third or fourth or something, or second or third or something at a local show, first one. And it must have been second because I qualified for nationals. And she's like, I would not even consider going to nationals until you win the overall at a local show. I'm like, okay, well, thanks, but I'm paying a coach to advise me. So like, but the way she said it and the expectation of excellence, it stuck with me all these years. I don't even remember who she was, but there's some truth to it. And then there's a little bit of like, well, how are you going to experience what a national show is like if you don't go? But you also don't want to go just because you qualified. Because not everybody that qualifies at a show where there's only one person in it and you're it and you win, it doesn't mean that you should step on a national stage. So there was some truth to what she was saying. And then there was some like really piercing, like, it's got up your butt. Like, okay, like I have a great coach. So like, he's going to help me make that distinction. Nobody wants to send a lackluster athlete on stage. So I think that there's a lot of things that they don't tell you when you start, because it's become so, unless it's my Facebook feed, but I see so many people that compete, which is great that they're pushing their bodies. But I think it makes a lot of other people think that they can do it without the all-in commitment. Right. Because it gets overwhelming when you get inside and you get started and you're like, oh, there's more. You should probably know all of those things up front.
Yeah. It's like, how long am I running for? Oh, okay.
Yeah, exactly. Like there's just so much that, like, man, there's so many pieces of advice we can go on for days.
Yeah, because even the depletion, getting closer to prep for my first one, I'm like, oh my God, I'm exhausted. It's 1 o'clock in the afternoon. I am exhausted. And I messaged my coach. I'm like, what do people do? Because you're working, you're up early, you're working out, you're working, then you're probably doing more cardio after work. And then you still have your life. And it's like, what do they do? And he said, well, when we're a couple weeks out, or you sleep. I'm like, how can I sleep? I'm working. And he said, some people take time off and just so that their body can have that rest, but you don't.
Yeah, it's not healthy. Like, do you ever see that all these people are doing these shows at a local level, like amateurs and novices, and you're like, do you all watching this think that this is healthy? Like when you go to do this, you do it multiple times, you realize like my approach now is to explain to people like, I'm doing this for a purpose, and it's get in, get out. Like, you cannot stay there. You cannot stay your 48 hours out of a show lean for the rest of your year. Like, you just can't. You will die, because it is not a health. It's like a wrestler, right? Depleting to get on the scale before a meet, right? They run in trash bags or whatever the heck they do to like just make the number on the scale, right? But then they get out, right? They go home, they eat, whatever. So it's very interesting to me how it's become so common to step on stage, but it's not really a representation of the healthiest thing to be.
Mm-hmm.
Process. So when somebody is like, oh, this prep was a breeze, well, you probably didn't do it right.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's also a mental resilience too. Like, the more you do it and the higher your mental acuity is to really like have that toughness, it does get easier. Like, the things that you struggle with before do get easier. So it may not be a fair statement, but yeah, it can get easier, but it's never a cakewalk.
Yeah. I think it gets easier just because you know what to expect. So you're more prepared for it, other than with your first time when you are not prepared and you have no idea. So as you go on year by year, you're kind of like, okay, we're getting to this stage, so I know this is going to happen, so I'm ready for it. And like you say, that mentality just plays a huge role in this sport for sure.
And you know what, I think I'm so passionate about teaching people about this because my experience one year was so poor with respect to like the coaching support and the stuff that I didn't have that I needed, that all of my friends in the know mentally could pick me up from. And it was rough because, you know, the rebound is horrible, the weight gain is horrible, the body pain is horrible when you do it wrong. But when this is just off because it was a horrible experience, the last thing you care about is if you're gaining weight. You just want to eat it because you're depressed, right? And so I think I'm so passionate about teaching people that the good, the bad, and the ugly, because in a way, like, I want to prevent that experience from someone, because I'm lucky I didn't have hormonal damage. I didn't have some of the things some of my friends experienced with poor coaching. But I'm kind of grateful for that experience, because now, even to this day, years later, and as a pro, I said to my coach the other day, I was like, I'm used to being beaten. Like, I'm used to like counting my spinach and being neurotic and being on cardio for 2 hours. Like, it's crazy how I'm less stressed right now, and I'm in a way better position. And I still, up to last week, I had to unwind, like, you know, that old way wasn't really working well, right? So I have to remember, like, even now, forget what you did that sucked, but take that experience and learn, like, there is a better way. So I'm kind of grateful for the negative experiences and stuff that didn't pan out for me, but at the same time, like, I want to save everybody from going through that.
Yes, absolutely. Learn from those experiences for sure.
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely been a journey, and I'm sure, you know, you could attest to this. You learn something about yourself every time. And my favorite quote, that a coach friend of mine in college sports when I was there, he asked us this question. He goes, does adversity reveal character or develop character? And so instead of asking the question, I look at the challenges of prep, and I'll just tell people, this is either going to reveal you or develop you, or maybe a little bit of both. But you got to be open to surrender and learn. And that's something that I will never forget, that quote. I will never forget that coach that told me, and I will always look at future challenges as like, what's the learn? Whereas before, my first thought was like fear and anxiety. Like, why is this happening? As opposed to, wait, this is happening. What am I learning? Yeah. And how can I be better? And I think that's just a quote that's like, wow. Yeah. Blows your mind. Even to this day, heard it like 13 years ago, and it still stays with me. Yeah. Yeah, that's a good one. So on that note, because that was a great quote, I want to thank you again. This has been fun. And like you said, we could go on forever talking about so many different things. There's just so many different aspects to bodybuilding for sure.
So hopefully we can do this again sometime and continue on with our conversation. It was a lot of
Absolutely. And as you continue to interview other competitors and you learn or expose to the world, because you're going to be posting this, right? Like their experience, it's going to be like I feel like a common thread with the things that are just, you're never going to get around it with bodybuilding, that it's going to happen. But at the same time, everybody's experience is so unique that it's going to give the listeners such an opportunity to hear different perspectives and know like a couple of main things that are important, that they're not alone. This is all normal for our world. It's not normal overall. And that you're doing something that you have, like me and my Stairmaster moment, right? I have the capability to do this.
Yes.
And I didn't want to waste that. And by doing that, you're going to be so proud and learn so much about me and all of my years of self-doubt and saying, you can't, like, that's just genetics. I'm like, no, I can. And I did. And now how can I make that better? And I think people will learn that, hearing other people's take on it.
Hearing their stories. There's a lot of stories out there to be heard, for sure.
Valuable. And I don't know if there's any one spot that really shows it. So it's an amazing start.
That's great. Well, thank you very much.
You're so welcome. Thanks for having me.
It's been great, and have a great evening.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
I want to thank my guest today and my listeners for joining me at Beyond the Prep. If you like this episode and want to make sure you don't miss any others, please subscribe. You can also find us on YouTube.